Hey, what's up everyone, it's Zoko and I wanted to talk about gear score today. More specifically, how to grind up to 600 quickly and efficiently. Since returning a couple weeks ago, I have pretty much every piece above 600 now, and I had started at about 520. I got that initial bump way back in November when I was doing the Merc Guard chest runs, but since that time, this grind has been made quite a bit easier. I'm going to be going through that today and the methods I did to raise it so efficiently. If you're trying to raise this as fast as possible, you will be doing 3 things daily, and it's certainly not required to grind this out as fast as possible. You can take your time if you want, but the more you put into it, the more you will get out of it. Alright, so the thing you can do pretty much with minimal amount of time spent is grinding out some gypsum. If you have recently returned and just not sure what this is, it is an item that allows you to craft a piece of gear for a guaranteed expertise increase. You can only use 1 gypsum per slot per day, unless you start breaking down legendary pieces or buying those scraps on the market, but for what I am sharing, I don't think you need to do that. Gypsum is gained from doing a number of activities. The easiest is probably gathering. If you run outside of town and start chopping trees, pretty soon you will find yourself with 3 hidden stashes. Those 3 stashes can be refined into 1 gypsum orb. Keep in mind you can only get those 3 hidden stashes once a day. Another way to get gypsum is hitting an aptitude checkpoint. If you have 200 gathering in any of your skills, you start gaining aptitude, which basically is another reason to keep grinding. These little checkpoints give you a crate of materials to complement the skill you're currently using and a piece of gypsum to be turned into a piece of gear. You'll notice the gypsum pieces are named different things like diamond, emerald, or whatever, but ultimately they turn into the same thing. The names really only signify how the gypsum was obtained. Now you can get a couple pieces daily from doing Outpost Rush and 3v3 arenas. The final bosses of the endgame expeditions, Genesis and Lazarus, will drop them as well. In fact, most activities have some point where they will drop some gypsum. And that includes doing chest runs, and by that I mean those world tours that I talked about hating so much in the beginning. Except the difference is it has expanded beyond just Shattered Mines and Merc Guard to include quite a few more areas. But yeah, you still get the increases there too. And the gypsum during the world tours comes from high level mobs you kill during the run and corruption portals. Now the world tours are not as effective as the last method I will talk about, but it is something I did a lot while waiting because it helped a hell of a lot in terms of efficiency. Even if slower, progress is progress, and once I realized 600 gear score was very attainable within a week, those world tours just didn't seem so bad. So if you're still lost, a world tour or train is just a mass group of people running around the map in a coordinated fashion to where pretty much any mob in the game is a non-issue. The whole thing is honestly pretty silly, but very effective for what we are trying to accomplish. Expertise increase frequency that come from chest drops, corruption portals, and just the level 60 plus mobs themselves have all been increased since I last played. That, coupled with the notification of an increase itself when it happens, made it very apparent I was going to progress pretty quick in comparison to before. These groups are generally found in recruitment chat where people say stuff like X, XWT for World Tour, or X Train. You may even see someone just say X and then the location. You then bounce around to the different in-game areas and run a loop. You can always ask in this same chat where the train is currently at, and you will generally get a quick response. This whole loop can take a couple of hours or so if you do the whole thing. During my time, I never did the whole thing, and I certainly missed chests during the runs that I did do. I was very inefficient at this because honestly I didn't feel like I was missing that much, so I wasn't stressing about it. I was progressing still very fast. And the main reason that I was progressing fast was because of Garden of Genesis. Bosses at the moment have an extremely high chance of dropping a gear score increase. I actually think it might be guaranteed if you have no pieces above 600. Not 100% on those details. I just know that fighting many of the named mobs in there always ended with that satisfying notification. Now before you run Genesis, make sure to check your faction NPC in Eden Grove to see if they have the quest associated with Genesis. The reason for this is the faction vendor sells 2 gypsum orbs daily for 7,000 faction points apiece. Completing a Genesis quest pretty much gives you this amount for one of them. This endgame dungeon is pretty damn easy to get through if you have the right people that know what they're doing. The main fight that gives groups an issue is the caretaker fight, which is pretty much the halfway point. And it may sound messed up, but if you're super new to the gear grind and struggling a little bit, by the time you made it to the caretaker, you have already gotten a few expertise increases. so no reason to feel too bad if your group rage quits here. I realize saying it's pretty easy is a bit douchey. Any part of a game tends to be when you get those mechanics down, and honestly, it really is the only fight that will cause you problems. But this is where making some friends with some solid players will go a very long way. Better yet, being in a company willing to run with you will be huge as well, and that is where I got lucky. I had a group that was willing to do this a bunch. It wasn't all the time, but we did do it enough that I learned what needed to be done, and I could explain it to people in future pug groups. It was still a bit more rough, but the progress was still there. I am going to be making a separate video about how the speedrun itself works. I'm not trying to claim to be some Genesis professional, which honestly just sounds ridiculous to say out loud, but I just want to help people in general and make their grind a bit easier. Once that is done, there should be a link up top at this point. Also, a quick side note, prioritize using the gypsum on your jewelry pieces. Running Genesis and doing chest runs drops way more armor and weapon drops, so raising those numbers comes much easier. Your jewelry will be way slower. My armor hit 600 way before my jewelry pieces, but because I was using the gypsum on those jewelry pieces, I saved myself probably quite a few days of grinding. So let's recap with my daily routine that I used to gain expertise. First part of the day was always go outside whatever settlement I was at and just do some gathering to get that gypsum from the hidden stashes. This takes just a handful of nodes and you can already be making progress on the day. Don't forget about the 2 daily orbs you can purchase from your faction NPC. This might seem like a lot of points to spend, but grabbing that Genesis quest from Eden Grove and repping out some PvP runs in Great Cleave can make some pretty quick work of this. At some point, I would check the group finder to see if Genesis had anyone waiting in a lobby, or if anyone in my company was willing to run it. Again, don't forget to check the faction NPC for quests. If that wasn't a thing, then I would X up for the World Tour, or queue up for either Outpost Rush or 3v3 Arena. If I was doing the World Tour or just running faction missions, then I would still be looking for a Genesis group during either the finder or recruitment chat. Obviously, if I'm in PvP, then I will be committed to that and I won't be able to find a Genesis group. This was all very dependent on my mood and just what I was wanting to do. So doing some gathering, PvP with either Arena, Outpost Rush, and some World Tour while waiting on Garden of Genesis groups skyrocketed my gear score quickly. I am not capped, but all my main slots are above 600 now. I am now starting to get some weapons at 600 as well, which makes me excited because I can start coming up with different builds again, which is what I did with my channel at launch. If you found this helpful, please leave a like, subscribe for more New World guides and information. Again, I'm Zoko, and I'm out of here.